Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The evening air was still warm when she stood near the dresser, fingers tracing the smooth fabric of her nightwear as if stalling for time. Every movement was slow, deliberate, half out of thought, half out of curiosity. Behind her, his shadow lingered near the edge of the bed, arms crossed, eyes quietly following her every gesture. They were husband and wife, yes, but tonight felt charged with something unspoken, something that hovered between playful tension and a daring, wordless challenge. She could feel his gaze on her back, hot, lingering, making her heartbeat pick up with every second that passed. Her hands moved slowly across the buttons, the hem brushing her skin like a whisper. He didn't say much, he rarely did when his mind was already reading hers. Just the sound of his breath deepening, the soft creak of the mattress as he leaned forward slightly, waiting. "Are you always this slow?" he murmured finally, his voice low and teasing, half a question, half a provocation. She glanced over her shoulder, their eyes locking for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. There was no anger in his words, no real impatience, only that quiet insistence that had always pulled her in. Her lips curved, just faintly, and that was all it took. In 2 quick steps, he closed the distance, his hands finding her waist with a firm, almost startling grip. Her breath caught, the fabric slipping from her fingers as he turned her, gently at first, then with a suddenness that sent a rush of heat through her chest. The bed was just behind her, and before she could gather her thoughts, she felt the press of the mattress beneath her, his hands braced on either side. The room went still. Their eyes held each other, his dark with a promise he hadn't spoken yet, hers wide with a mix of surprise and something far more electric. The space between them felt impossibly small now, filled with all the things they hadn't said all evening. And just as his breath brushed her cheek, close enough to make her forget the air between them, he stopped. Waiting. Testing. Letting the moment hang like a spark before a storm. Something was about to change. She could feel it. Her fingers curled around the sheets as his breath lingered close, warm enough to stir the fine hairs at her neck. Neither of them moved right away. There was a strange sweetness in that pause, a quiet battle of wills wrapped in the heat of their closeness. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice a blend of challenge and invitation. His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just waiting to see how long you'll keep pretending you're not." She scoffed lightly, though her cheeks warmed. "Pretending what?" "That you like it when I don't let you run from me," he said, his fingers brushing the fabric at her waist, light enough to make her shiver, heavy enough to remind her how easily he could pull her closer if he wanted. The silence after that was different, thicker, threaded with the pulse of something real. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding and looked up at him, really looked. The lines of his jaw, the way his eyes softened when they met hers, the quiet restraint in his posture, it wasn't just heat. It was knowing. "You don't have to rush," he added after a moment, his thumb tracing a slow, lazy circle against her side. "I just want you here. Like this." Her laugh came out softer than she intended. "You always say things like that at the worst moments." "Or maybe the best ones," he countered, leaning just enough that his forehead nearly touched hers. Their noses brushed, a whisper of contact that sent another rush down her spine. Her hands, almost without thought, found his shirt, fingers toying with the edge of the fabric. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't surrender either. It was something in between, a quiet admission that the tension wasn't one-sided. "I should finish dressing," she murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. "Should you?" he asked, and the teasing in his tone wrapped around her like a tether. Neither moved. The room felt suspended, like one breath could tip them over the edge, or one word could pull them back. And somewhere in that stillness, her pulse betrayed her, steady, eager, waiting. The soft tension between them cracked slightly when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A quick vibration, harmless in sound, but her eyes flicked toward it before she could stop herself. One glance at the screen, just a name lighting up, and something in her chest shifted. He noticed. Of course, he did. "You're staring," he said quietly, his voice low, almost unreadable. "I wasn't," she replied too quickly, hands slipping from his shirt. "It just caught my eye." He reached past her to silence it, his arm brushing against hers, warm, steady, and frustratingly calm. "Work," he said, as if that explained everything. Always knows when to interrupt. But her mind had already gone somewhere else, back to the earlier weeks when his hours stretched longer, the late messages, the way his voice sometimes carried a different softness on the phone. She hated how easily doubt slid into her veins, even now, even when his hands were still right here. He caught the flicker in her expression, and for a second, his eyes hardened. Not in anger, but in something like hurt. "Is that what you think?" he asked, softer this time, leaning in just enough to study her face. She wanted to say no. Wanted to shrug it off with a laugh. Instead, her gaze dropped, betraying the way her mind was already weaving small, quiet insecurities into the fabric of this moment. His hand lifted her chin gently, forcing her to meet his eyes again. "You think I'd be here like this, if it wasn't you?" he murmured. The heat in his voice was different now, not teasing, not demanding. It carried weight. A quiet claim. And just like that, the air shifted again. The jealousy wasn't gone, but it tangled with the pull between them, making her aware of how close his fingers still were, how her breath matched his, how one small move could break the tension entirely. She swallowed. "Then show me." He didn't close the gap, just stayed there, letting the meaning of her words hang heavy between them. The kind of suspense that wasn't loud, but deep, like an echo waiting for its answer. Outside, the night pressed softly against the window. Inside, every second felt like a held breath, daring them both to take the next one. The silence grew heavier, thick enough to make her heartbeat feel loud in her chest. His hand lingered beneath her chin, thumb tracing the faintest line along her jaw as if memorizing her. She didn't pull away this time. Couldn't. There was something in his eyes now, no teasing, no distance, just that raw, magnetic draw that always left her unsteady. "I hate it when you doubt me," he murmured, voice low, almost a breath against her skin. She exhaled slowly, her fingers finding the edge of his shirt again. "Then don't give me reasons to." His lips curved, barely. "I didn't," he whispered, leaning in, the warmth of his breath brushing her cheek, her neck. "But maybe I should remind you why you shouldn't doubt at all." Her hands tightened on the fabric, a wordless answer he seemed to read instantly. He shifted, closing the space, until her knees brushed his legs and her back found the soft resistance of the mattress. The tension was unbearable now, not because of what had happened, but because of what hadn't. Every inch of him radiated heat. His fingers slid from her jaw to the side of her neck, resting there with a patience that burned more than haste ever could. She tilted her head slightly, letting the touch linger, letting her breath betray her. The night outside was silent, but inside the room, the air hummed with their restraint. He leaned closer, their foreheads nearly touching, his voice a soft growl. "You keep pulling me in and pushing me away in the same breath. Tell me which one you really want." Her lips parted, not for an answer but for the way his nearness robbed her of it. "Maybe I want both," she whispered. His eyes closed briefly, a low chuckle escaping that sounded more like surrender than amusement. Dangerous answer. His hand slid to her waist, fingers pressing gently, not demanding, just there, claiming space. Her own hand rose, almost without thought, to his collar, fingertips brushing his neck. And there it was, the brink. The moment where one more inch, one more breath, would unravel everything they'd been holding back. They stayed there, locked in the gravity of almost. Just as the air between them felt too heavy to breathe, a sharp knock broke through the silence. It wasn't loud, just a single, precise tap on the bedroom door, but it snapped her out of the spell like a sudden gust of wind through warm curtains. Her hands dropped from his collar, and his eyes, dark, unreadable, shifted toward the door. "Were you expecting someone?" she asked quietly, her voice a low thread of suspicion and curiosity. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, a flicker of something passing across his expression, annoyance, maybe even guilt. "No," he said finally, but it wasn't the kind of no that erased all doubt. The knock came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. She sat up a little straighter, the fabric of her nightwear sliding against her skin as if to remind her how vulnerable this moment had been. "Who is it?" she called, trying to sound casual. Silence. Then a woman's voice, distant, familiar. "I didn't mean to disturb. I just thought I heard you." Her stomach tightened. The voice was unmistakable. His colleague, the one whose name had lit up his phone earlier. He moved toward the door, his hand brushing her knee as he passed, a fleeting touch that both reassured and unsettled her. "Stay," he whispered under his breath, more like a command than a comfort. But staying still felt impossible now. Her mind raced with 1,000 small moments she'd brushed off, late-night texts, half-explained calls, the way he sometimes lingered in his own silence as if carrying something unspoken. The door opened slightly, revealing a sliver of the hallway's cooler light and the silhouette of the woman, hair tied, coat half on, looking oddly out of place at this hour. "I brought the files you left behind," she said, her eyes flicking briefly toward the bed, then back to him. "Thanks," he replied shortly, taking them without meeting her gaze for long. "You didn't need to come all the way." The woman hesitated, her lips parting as if she wanted to say more, then pressed them into a tight smile. It seemed important. When the door closed again, the room felt even smaller. He turned to her, the files in his hand like evidence of something she couldn't name. "Work," he said again, but the words sounded hollow now. She folded her arms across her chest. She didn't look like she was here for files. His eyes softened, stepping closer, his voice dropping back into that low, intimate tone. Then what did she look like she was here for? Her breath caught. Because even now, jealousy burning faint in her chest, doubt creeping in, the pull between them hadn't faded. If anything, it grew sharper, fueled by the intrusion. He set the files aside, his hand returning to her waist with a deliberate, almost defiant tenderness. "You think I'd let anyone else stand here like this?" he whispered. And there it was, tension layered on tension. Heat, doubt, desire, all colliding in the charged air between them. The door's soft click echoed like the end of a challenge. For a heartbeat, the room was silent, only their breaths, uneven and full, filled the space. She sat there, arms still folded, trying to mask the storm inside her. He set the files down on the dresser, his movements deliberate, and turned back to her with that look, the one that never begged, only waited. "You really think I'd bring her here for something more than work?" His voice was quiet now, stripped of defense. She wanted to argue. Wanted to hold on to the jealousy because it felt safer than the ache underneath. But then his hand reached for hers, warm, steady, familiar. "Hey," he said softly, fingers threading through hers. "You've always had my time. Even when I didn't know how to show it." Something in her chest gave way. It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them, low and raw, like he'd been carrying them too long. She let him pull her up gently. Their bodies aligned almost naturally, the space between them vanishing as his forehead met hers. Her folded arms slipped apart, resting against his chest, and his hands found her waist with that same deliberate touch from earlier, but this time, there was no holding back. The kiss came not in a rush but like an answer, slow, deep, drawing out every breath they'd been saving. Her fingers curled in his shirt, his grip tightened around her, and the jealousy, the doubt, the interruption, they melted into something heavier, warmer, more real. And then he whispered it, against her lips, "I sent those files to myself, weeks ago." She pulled back slightly, blinking. "What?" "She didn't need to bring them. I wanted you to see. To finally ask. Because I can't keep letting you doubt what's already yours." It wasn't anger in her chest anymore, it was something sharp and sweet, a rush that burned through every crack they'd left open between them. Her laugh came out shaky, almost a sigh. "You're impossible. And you're mine," he murmured, pulling her closer until the room was only them, heat, breath, and the quiet, undeniable promise that the storm had always been leading here. The room felt different now, quieter, but not empty. The tension that had once wrapped around them had softened into something deeper, something they could finally hold without fear. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her cheek, his arms wrapped securely around her as if they belonged there all along. "I didn't realize how much I missed this," she whispered, her fingers tracing slow circles against his shirt. He smiled into her hair, his hand brushing gently along her back. "It was always here. We just kept building walls we didn't need." The files lay forgotten on the dresser, the late-night knock now just a faint echo in their memory. What lingered instead was the quiet assurance of their closeness, the way his thumb found her jaw when she looked up, the way her breath steadied just by being near him. They moved together with an ease that felt earned, no rush, no pretenses, just two people choosing to be present again. His lips found hers in a soft, unhurried kiss, deepening with the kind of warmth that came after storms, not the first spark, but the steady glow that followed. "You know," she murmured when they parted, a teasing smile tugging at her lips, "you could have just told me." "And missed all that," he replied, a playful glint in his eyes as his fingers laced with hers. "Not a chance." She laughed, a sound that melted the last of the night's unease. Together, they sank back onto the bed, the world outside fading into the background. There was no jealousy now, no doubt, only the hum of their breathing, the quiet rhythm of fingertips tracing familiar paths, the warmth of skin meeting skin where words no longer needed to reach. Tomorrow would bring its own noise, calls, files, interruptions, but tonight, they had found their way back to each other. And as the night wrapped around them, her last thought before closing her eyes was simple and full: "This is where we begin again."